Go. Thank you. Good idea. Okay. Now, again, if you are ready, you guys are welcome to get started with this. And I'm re-recording it, okay? Lily's my timekeeper. Thank you, Lily. Dry wash means dry paper. No matter what, you always have to add water to your colors. If you're working with the cakes, like so, you're going to add a little bit of water to whatever color you're working with. All right, so I'm adding water to each of these as I need them. Dry wash is simply dry paper. Again, this is a really nice thing to use in a small defined area of your painting. I wouldn't use this if you had a very large area because depending on the paper that you use, sometimes you will see the brush strokes, so you may not want to do that. Okay, so dry wash equals dry paper. Now again, keeping my 2 cups of water here, guys. If you're changing colors, it's kind of nice just to make sure your brush is very clean. All right, I'm gonna now move in a minute to my wet wash. Okay, notice how quickly the water gets discolored. So remember, like yesterday, I was saying, if by chance you go with lighter colors, make sure that brush is clean because it will change the color of your paint very quickly. Wet wash. I prepared my paint and I prepared my surface. A wet wash is simply actually wet paper. Notice that wherever you have water on your paper, the paint is going to quickly go to. Okay. If it's not even, you can use a little bit of the gravity concept by actually tilting your paper to move it where you want it to go. The wet wash is great, guys, for a larger area. So let's say you have a sky to do, you have a mountain area to do, whatever you might have that's a little bit of a bigger section is kind of nice to use for a wet wash. Now keep in mind you can layer paints. And speaking of layering, I'm going to start with a layer here for my glazing, just so that way I can show you how that works. Now for the glazing, I'm going to keep it light by adding more water. I'm just going to put, I could do a wet wash here or a dry wash. I'm just going to do a dry wash just to get this going. Now glazing requires a second layer of paint. So I want this to dry first 100%. Okay, I have my gradation wash. So I'm going to use some of the darker colors so I don't necessarily have to wash my paintbrush out thoroughly. However, just so you can you see there's just a light tint to that? That's because, I mean, there's still a little bit of pigment in the brush. So a double cup of water is kind of nice. So you have your dirty cup and the clean cup. It'll save you some time and possibly some aggravation. Okay, so for my gradation, yesterday when I went over this, I used 1 color. And just because today's a new day, I'm going to go and use 2 colors. If I want a darker color here, guys, I just use less water or more pigment. Now, in order to start getting rid of some of the pigment, I can start to dry off my brush a little. I have my handy dandy, not so great paper towel. All right, and I can play around with what I want here. But I know I'm going to add more paint down there, so I'm making sure that stays nice and wet. Now I'm going to go and flip-flop that, as in turn it upside down. Can you guys see okay? If you can't, let me know. I'm scurrying to get this in because I'd like to post this video for you. So I want it lighter in the middle, and then I want it to transition to the other color. So I can go back into this. You kind of have to play around with it a little bit to do a little bit of the blending. I want it to get that darker magenta as it goes toward the bottom. So I transitioned my colors. This could be great in a sky area. Again, I have the colors of possibly a sky. You know, it really depends on what area. It could be something really terrific for, let's say, some sort of a grass type field or something like that if you were working with your greens. All right, and that would be your gradation wash. Now, moving forward here, I'm going to try to turn this a little bit just so it's a little bit easier maybe for you to see. The next one I went over yesterday was the wet on damp. This is the one that can be temperamental. And I'm just gonna put a color on that I had. So wet on damp, I have to monitor how wet it is because you need it to be damp, but not like soaking wet either. You don't want it to be like a puddle. So I'm gonna monitor this for a minute and see what I can do with it. In the meantime, you know what I did not do? I gave you guys masking with a soft edge, but I didn't put it on my paper. So I put a little bit of the rubber cement there. If you don't have this at home, again, you can even do a resist with a crayon if you happen to have a crayon at home, because basically that's what happens. It's a resist. Okay, and this is going to be for my masking hard edge. I'm using tape. And I'm just going to throw a couple pieces down. Now this is drying pretty fast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try it. So again, you may find that I did a dry wash, so it dries faster. And this one, it's a little too dry. So I'm going to add more moisture to it and redo. Sometimes it'll happen, guys. Like here, especially with the heat on, you really have to monitor how wet it is because you need it slightly wet, but you don't want it so wet that the colors just totally bleed together. All right, like I said, if at first you don't succeed, guess what? Try again. All right, so we're gonna let that kind of dry for just a minute. You can see there's a little bit of moisture on it, so I need it to dry a little bit more than that. While we're waiting, I'm gonna go ahead and do this hard edge. This is not dry all the way. I wanna make sure that I do have it dry completely before I paint over rubber cement so it doesn't ruin my brush, because it will. Okay, and I'm gonna leave that on there until it is 100% dry. Okay, and next one, I'm gonna go ahead and reattempt my wet on damp. Okay, this is gonna be cool. This is where the color will bleed out a little bit into the background. It's still somewhat defined. This is really fun if you have like a misty day or a snowy day or a foggy day. You could even have like a stands full of people. I kind of just did like, you know, some pseudo greenery in there. So it's going to start to bleed out just a smidgen in there. All right, and that's kind of what it will tend to look like. We're going to let that finish doing its thing. So for the glazing, I always say it's kind of like the donut concept. Glazing donuts, you're putting something on top of it. At least that's what it reminds me of. This is nice if you have, let's say you have the sun shining on an object, whether it be a flower or a ladybug, whatever it might be, and you get the warmth feeling. Now the glazing, the second layer goes on top of it when it's dry. So it's really color building is what it's doing. But I wanted to show you is I'm using the idea of the sun shining on an object. See how you get that warm feel from that? I'm going to do the opposite. Let's say you have something with shadow and you can actually take and use a cool color. I'm making sure you can see the color that was beneath it too. So it kind of gives you the feel of that. See how nice that works? Okay, to the touch, this is dry. That means I can go ahead and show you the soft masking as well. How are we doing for time? You have 3 minutes and 50 seconds. Okay, I have a couple minutes left. Perfect. My masking. Notice the resist that goes on there? And that works really, really well. Okay, so I leave everything on there till it's 100% dry, and then I'll show you guys how to pull that off when you're done. Now, I had to go grab my salt. You can use regular table salt. Now with this one, the salt technique, guys, you want to make sure you work dark and you work wet. So this should be like a puddle on your paper. It works best this way. So I'm going to go ahead and just get like a little puddle on the paper. This happens to be a grinder. If you have coarse salt, you'll get more of a differentiated look to it. Okay, a dab will do you with the salt, guys. Take a look. It's going to start to pull the color toward it and leave a crystallized kind of look. How are we doing with time? 2 minutes and 40 seconds. I have one more quick one I'm going to show you, which is a lot of fun, and then we're going to stop this video. Okay, I grabbed a dark color because, again, it's kind of fun with a dark color. And let me grab the rubbing alcohol. Guys, this is rubbing alcohol from the bathroom, you know, kind of stuff. Okay, I'm taking a little bit of it. This is going to be so much fun. This too, you want to work with pretty wet. It should look like a puddle on your paper. Watch this. I'm cleaning up my brush all the way. Look how fun this is going to be. I put my brush in the cap of it and tapping it. See that cool effect? So it kind of pulls it toward, this is an example of a different color that I did yesterday. And there we have it. These are a few techniques we're going to start with. I will continue on more of them, but this is just to get us going. And right now I'm going to stop recording so that ultimately